What is the postmodern perspective? If you are unfamiliar with the concept of postmodernism, let's just say, for the purposes of this paper, if modernism is saying things are clear-cut and always progressing, postmodernism is things not being clear-cut, and progress is a constant one step forward and two steps backward sort of situation. Now, let's have a little history lesson. Since 1792, the ideas of feminism have grown more complex over time, in particular postmodernism's growing understanding of gender role performance. The 2010s began the fourth wave of feminism, which is characterized by the use of technology to challenge gender inequality. Beginning in 1947, the increasing complexity of digital amusement devices and widespread use helped shift the United States into a technological society. Better graphics abilities and user interfaces transformed the digital landscape over time from a text on a screen to a medium for sharing ideas. Fourth wave feminism ushered in new challenges for video game companies to represent the female experience in a postmodern influence world, with no single definition of what the female experience is. Women in recent video game media are overall still as sexualized as they have been in the past. However, the feminism movement propelled the end of the objectified female protagonist and ushered in a new age of hypersexualized characters of all genders. The feminist movement, combined with postmodern influence, ricocheted into paradigm shifts, resulting in a more abstract overall understanding of gender performance. Through interpreting artistic decisions made by the developers of the role-playing games Ace Attorney, Hades, and Transistor, we will find that women are less objectified in recent video game media. However, overall sexualization of lead protagonists, regardless of gender, emerges in its shadow. Role-playing games have the ability to put the player into the shoes of a fictional character and experience the world through their lens. In Ace Attorney, you play the role of a male lawyer, Phoenix Wright, with the secondary characters primarily always being women. Your mentor is the formidable Mia Fey, a large-busted woman whose reputation and abilities are directly proportional to her breast size. Following the pilot level of the game, where you rely on her abilities to win the case, she is murdered, and stars as the victim of the second level. Mia Fey is portrayed as a sexy but secondary character whose purpose is to be appealing and disposable to hook the player during the first few hours of playing the game. Punishing those who do not correctly perform gender is a continuous pattern in the early era of Ace Attorney, with the second example being Jean Armstrong, a caricature of a gay man dressed in drag. Jean Armstrong is made fun of and insulted throughout the level for presenting as an effeminate man. While other comedic media may explore drag with the intention of revealing the harsh reality of presenting as a woman, Ace Attorney uses drag as a punitive measure for the sake of entertaining the player. While the concept of gender as an identity is postmodern, this rejection of that idea is of itself a modern reaction. Later Ace Attorney games display a shift towards accepting postmodern influences, for example, the inclusion of Athena Sykes, an alternate point of view character. Role-playing games are postmodern in the way that gender is automatically treated as a performance of the player. One may identify as a man but may play himself as a woman online, while not jeopardizing his own real-life identity. In single-player games like that of Ace Attorney, a player is put into another person's identity in a private space and may intimately interact with the fictional world as a different gender, however important that may be to the plot. In the case of Athena Sykes, the largely male audience of Ace Attorney found themselves playing as her when continuing the storyline of the franchise. Misogyny that had once presented itself in Ace Attorney during the time of Mia Fey has since changed with the addition of Athena Sykes.
That was for last time.
Reaching a wide audience online, Supergiant Games made the decision to use sexualization as an artistic choice, and not as a means to solely make characters more aesthetically pleasing. Hades is a narrative-driven roguelike dungeon crawler that shook the gaming industry in 2020. You play the role of the Greek god Zagreus, son of Hades and Persephone, as you spend all eternity fighting your way out of the underworld of Greek myth. With all the characters being based on Greek mythology, the artist Gen Z and her team decided to make all the gods familiar enough for them to resemble humans, but also aesthetically attractive enough to be considered unreasonably beautiful and beyond human as possible. This decision allowed the artists to reapply historical views of Greek gods as appearing superhuman with that of the modern perspective. Conventionally beautiful depictions of the gods found in the artwork of Hades exemplify sexualization of women as well as men. For example, Aphrodite, inspired by her new portrait by Sandro Botticelli, is flirtatious. However, her power of love is highlighted as one of the most dangerous of all. Male gods almost always have exposed arms or chests with unrealistic abs and muscles. Dionysus, Theseus, and Achilles are a few examples. The game transforms the media's previous tendency to primarily depict women in visually gratifying ways to attract a male audience to depict all characters, when possible, in visually gratifying ways to attract a wider audience. Hades exemplifies the postmodern development of the concept of gender determining identity rather than biological sex. Primordial chaos is an example of such a development. In Greek myth, chaos is the Big Bang. At the beginning of the universe, there was nothing, and suddenly there was everything, and that everything sprung from primordial chaos. The development team knew, as a sentient concept of all things, they had to make decisions as to how to practically allow this concept to speak to the character and imagine what that would sound like. Primordial chaos became a genderless being, detached from cultures and emotion, and speaks to the player with a voice that sounds both male and female.
It was in accordance with the fate's design as well. The result is more amusing even than expected. Thus, thank you.
Gender is the inner workings of sex, where sex becomes a cultural sign to differentiate one human form from another and to be used for any corporeal project. Hades rejects the continuance of the sexual binary and transforms gender identity from a strictly human experience to an experience of anything sentient.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
Transistor is a 1920s-styled science fiction cyberpunk role-playing game, where the player plays as the female singer Red as she stalks a terrorist group called the Camerata. At the beginning of the game, you discover your bodyguard's soul, referred to in-game as a trace, was absorbed into the Transistor. This large weapon absorbs traces and uses them as special attacks. Set in a postmodern science fiction world, where people have the ability to use technology to shape every aspect of their life, Transistor deconstructs technology and our sense of reality. The storyline of Transistor revolves around a romance between Red and her nameless bodyguard. For the purposes of this presentation, I will refer to him by his development name, the Boxer, but otherwise he is referred to as Unknown in the game. Developers originally planned for the game to star the same characters in reversed roles, with him being a boxer and Red being his singer love interest. The original plot lacked originality, as he was the gruff street rat who fell in love with the dainty famous singer, an archetype that has been overused in the media before. In postmodern fashion, Transistor flips the damsel in distress archetype on its head and transforms it to where the celebrity singer becomes the fighter and her love interest becomes the moral support. Red had lost her voice in an assassination attempt, to which the boxer had lost his body. Together, she becomes his body and he becomes her voice, the same way that she has a name and he does not. He was the silent guy and she was the outspoken singer. In losing her voice, she became the silent one, and the boxer became the narrator of the story. Voice becomes a motif throughout the game, since Cloudbank is a place where all people are given a voice and everything is voted on, from weekly entertainment to the weather. The developers made Red a revolutionary whose music warned against how consensus culture has caused the people of the city to lose their individual voices. Through music included in the game, the players cue in on the political state of their city, Cloudbank. She later sings, At the end, when the process switches ownership from the Camerata to Red, we are left in a world where no one is left to vote on the shape of Cloudbank. Despite the whole city falling into a state of singular decisions, of mediocrity, and no individuality or any creative differences in day-to-day life, The game highlights that when she casts a vote, it was a choice, not a vote, and it rains in Cloudbank for the first time in Red's memory. Instead of rebuilding, she returns to the place where the boxer was murdered, and she takes her life. The song that plays after sings.
Find me, we are paper boats floating on a stream, and it would seem we'll never be apart.
Harkening back to how this game transforms the Mario saves Princess Peach, damsel in distress archetype, Red dies at the end because that was always her plan since the beginning. In the same essence in which a female character falls madly in love with a man enough to die for him, it is in the execution of her revenge story that gives her dimension and makes her different. Postmodernity in Transistor flips gender archetypes around, however does not reject gender archetypes outright. It rather transforms those ideas. Postmodernism's ideas of gender determining identity and not sex portrayed women beyond their physical sexual appeal and pushed for more sharing of traits between female, male, and non-binary performance. Further research can go into how increased attention to the female gender performance has redefined and evolved the male and non-binary gender performance. Video games are about subversion and gender performance. Role-playing games provide a safe place for people to experience different perspectives. I found that sexualization is an integrated part of the female fictional protagonist, from Red to Meg to Mia. Although how attractive someone is in relation to their gender is increasingly becoming less of a tool used on female characters, and more so a tool used on all characters. In the market for video games, there is equality between the genders in equal sexualization. Video games do not create a world where women are less sexualized, they create a world where everyone is more sexualized, with the only caveat that women are no longer objectified. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope that everyone has learned a little something more about video games. Perhaps maybe you'll pick up one of these games that I have analyzed yourself and experience them. Thank you so much.